Okay, welcome to an introduction to parliamentary procedure. This is a mandated way that we conduct ourselves according to our Book of Order because we conduct meetings according to Robert's Rules, newly revised, and I'll be doing an introduction to that here. Parliamentary procedure, the way we do it, is often criticized. Partially what I want to say to people, and you'll hear some of my own critiques in ways that I think we need to move forward in terms of our decision making, but we need to understand it well first. And part of what people feel uncomfortable about this process is their lack of information about it, their lack of understanding about how it can work well. And that issue will attend itself to any process. Any process that we adopt needs to be widely and deeply understood and adopted and agreed to, and then it can become, I think it can work as well as it can work. In terms of parliamentary procedure, I want you to be aware of three resources that you have. The first and most important is Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. We're in the 11th edition right now. You should have a book that looks like that brown book with the gold edging and the red banner across the top. I required you to buy it. I'm only asking you to read really the introduction to it because it is a resource book that I recommend that you carry into every session meeting, because if you get bound up in terms of how you're doing things, then you pull something out and you say, let's figure this out together, and you don't get at one another relationally when you could get information that can help you figure that out. I want you to know the history, so I asked you to read the introduction, but you're welcome to continue to read through it. It tends to function more as a resource book than anything else. I do want you to be aware that there's more to Robert's Rules than parliamentary procedure. There's information in there about boards, and there's information in there about minutes, much of which is very helpful to us. Be aware that our Constitution says that we use Robert's Rules except when it conflicts with our Constitution. So the things in there about officers don't pertain to us because we have our own information about how we want to structure our officers. With all of this, if you've got any questions, please ask, and I'm a resource to you during this class and after this class. There are two other resources produced by the Presbyterian Church that are really excellent resources about parliamentary procedure. The first, over on the right-hand side of the screen by Greg Goodwiller, is a guide to parliamentary procedure in the Presbyterian Church USA. I've given you access to a copy of it. It's our most recent guide to it. It has a lot of really helpful information in it. The other one is by Mary Ann Wolfe. Mary Ann Wolfe was the stated clerk of Pittsburgh Presbytery for a number of years, and early on, after the reunion of the Northern and Southern churches, she produced this Parliamentary Procedures in the Presbyterian Church USA, which I think is no longer being printed but remains available, and I've given you electronic access to it. In terms of them being helpful, they're both helpful. What's really helpful in both of them is a guide to motions in a chart form that I would recommend that you have. I actually carry one with me when I'm going to meetings because it's a easy way to look down and figure out how to move from motion to motion. Mary Ann Wolfe's Parliamentary Procedures I find very helpful. Could be because I was introduced to it first. I commend both of them to you. Neither of them are official. Both of them are helpful, and both of them are brief. They are the kinds of things that if a session wants to learn more, they're easy ways for people to read just a little bit about parliamentary procedure. Assumption and key points of parliamentary procedure. First, I want you to know that parliamentary procedure and Robert's Rules works best with an assumption that there's a desire for unity. If people want to tear a body apart, they don't want to work well together, then Robert's Rules can't help them because they're not going to commit themselves to it. The other thing that Mary Ann Wolfe says is that Robert's Rules assumes that the tension between a majority and a minority is the means by which the Spirit is present. So it assumes that in that conversation between a majority and a minority, that's where something generative can emerge. And that can be helpful to a majority to listen to a minority, and a minority to be empowered to speak. That language of minority and majority can be, for those of us who were raised in an ethos of consensus and we're all working together, can sound alien to us. It's really meant only descriptively in terms of size and not and equal value to both of them. That's one of the key points of Robert's rules. Key points: members of a body have in Robert's rules 4 key rights. The first is the right to know. They've got a right to know what's going on, so it's the job of the moderator to help that happen. They're supposed to know when meetings happen, get due notice of things. They're supposed to know what's going on. They have a right to speak, so they have a right to be heard and to have their perspective known. They have a right to vote. If you're a member, you have a right to vote. So every member of a session has a right to vote, and they have a right to hold office. And that's how the body works together. Some principles of Robert's rules: its goal is that the rights and the unity of the body shall be preserved. So it's aiming for the entirety of the body to decide something and to move forward and to hold it together. The assumption of Robert's rules is that the will of the majority shall prevail and that the rights of a minority shall be protected. So people who have a minority perspective have the right to be heard, to make a case. They're not to be shut down. On the other hand, in the end, the will of majority is supposed to prevail in Robert's rules, and that's one of the big questions about for Robert's rules is the question of this majority and whether it really is the most helpful way to think that we've got something figured out. In Robert's rules, the moderator is key. Our Book of Order says that the moderator possesses the authority necessary for preserving order and conducting efficiently the business of the body, and shall convene and adjourn the body in accordance with its own action. In other words, the body gets to decide to be convened and to adjourn. What Robert's Rules says is just key for a moderator is we protect decorum, and that means that we help people act well. So some things that go on in more formal settings of Robert's Rules are people address the moderator and not one another, and that is to help keep emotion down and keep people focused on the issues. The role of the moderator is to guide process and to help the body make a decision, and that's the role of a moderator, and to explain options. The moderator is to be a communicator. And you'll see if you read deeply in Robert's Rules that the moderator's to read a motion again before it's voted on. I mean, there's some key places where Robert's Rules try to say, you know what, if you're going to moderate, then one of the things you're going to do is give options to the body and help the body do what it wants to do. Note in terms of our polity that a stated clerk advises but does not rule. The moderator's in charge. Often the stated clerk in a presbytery synod general assembly is a parliamentarian, knows a lot about process and procedure, but they don't make the decision. The moderator makes the decision. And Robert's Rules actually has a provision if the body doesn't like the decision of the moderator to challenge that, because ultimately the goal is for the body to be in charge. So it's actually a very democratic way to work together if people know the rules and know how to speak. The motion is the key piece of Robert's Rules. The way to get something before an assembly is a motion. The proper terminology is I move that. I move that we hire so-and-so. I move that we adopt this policy. Nothing is properly before an assembly unless it is a motion. I mean, that's what an assembly, according to Robert's Rules, deals with. There are 82 motions, but fewer than that get regularly used. And really broadly, I'm going to talk more about motions. There's 2 types of motions, main motions and secondary motions. Main motions can be made only when there's no other business on the floor. There's 2 types of main motions, original main motion and incidental main motion. All business of a governing body is begun by placing a main motion on the floor. There can only be one main motion in the assembly at any given time, and that motion must be disposed of permanently or temporarily before another main motion can be before the assembly. So this is to help keep people focused, keep people clear, and to move in a linear way from business to business. Original main motions introduce a new subject to an assembly. So if you're at a session meeting and nothing's on the floor, then someone can say, I move that we add a second worship service. And then if that has never come before the assembly before, it needs a second, which gives it enough weight. See, that's still a minority that wants to discuss it. You don't know what the majority wants, but the minority gets there's a sufficient majority there to say, yep, let's talk about this. It's before the assembly. That's an original main motion. It is what starts things. Incidental main motions are incidental to the business at hand, and they're in order, meaning they're allowed depending on their necessity at the time. They have no rank in relation to the other, and they are mostly used to clarify other motions. Incidental motions move action laterally, which means kind of side to side. So you've realized in some sense that you got to deal with something else just a little bit in order to move forward, but you're not moving things forward. There's lots of incidental main motions, or incidental motions. They don't have a rank, and they can be used depending on whether or not they're necessary. So here they are. I move that we suspend the rules. I move a point of order. I object to the consideration of a question. I want to divide the assembly. That means that instead of a voice vote, we do a different kind of vote. I want to consider something seriatim, which means that we want to consider it by paragraphs and not the whole thing. Want to reconsider, take from the table, and rescind. Those are other incidental motions. You can read more about those, and if we were in class, we'd probably talk a lot about your questions with them. Secondary motions permit more than one motion to be on the floor at one time in a way that the main motion is moved forward. And they have to be voted on before you return to the main motion. So you've got subsidiary motions and privileged motions. Subsidiary motions, there's 7 of them. They perfect, which means improve, get ready for a vote. The main motion, bring the subject at hand to resolution. They have a rank, and so you have to move up and down a ladder for them. A motion to refer the main motion to committee, then you can't amend it. And that's to keep things in order. See, because if you're just trying to decide whether to refer to something, you don't want somebody to stand up and say, well, I want to amend it. No, you got to decide whether to refer it before you amend it. So there's some thinking behind this. And then there's privileged motions, which have to do with the rights and responsibilities of the governing body and its members. They're the highest rank to each other, and over all motions, they're always in order. They also don't advance the main motion. So here they are. So privileged motions fix the time at which to adjourn. They adjourn. They take a recess. There's a question of privilege, which means it's a question that a person in the assembly has. They call for the order of the day, and they're always in order if they are in order. Information to consider just for you. Some motions are debatable, some are not. Some take a majority, others a supermajority. I would invite you to see the chart, which is in either one of those other resources that I provided for you. The other things I'd say is don't stress out about this. It's often new information. People often don't have a lot of experience, have a lot of anxiety about, gosh, I'm going to moderate and do this. Smaller bodies are often more informal in the way they use these than larger bodies. And the last thing I'd say is to know Robert's rules before you critique Robert's rules, as I said at the beginning. Oh, here's the subsidiary motions. I'm sorry that that's out of order. Postpone indefinitely. Amend, the most complicated of that is a call to a substitute motion, but amend is what's used most in terms of working to perfect or make ready for a vote a motion. Commit, recommit, which means send to a committee, sometimes refer. Postpone definitely. Modify debate, a previous question, which means you're calling for a vote, lay on the table. There's the chart, which I'm not going to go over, but those are the ranking motions. And I invite you to explore, learn a lot about this, and ask with any questions that you have.